Welcome to Digitally Creative. I'm your host, Vincent Ferrari, and joining me this week is a real, live, actual Canadian, not in captivity, just a guest, the one and only Andrew Hatch. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. And just to give a little peek behind the curtain here, we have done that intro. That is the fourth time we did that intro. We are having major technical difficulties for some reason tonight, but it looks like everything's working normally. So I think, Andrew, we're finally going to get an episode out of this tonight.
Yeah, that's probably because I'm using the newest computer in the house instead of, you know,
tends to solve a lot of problems.
either that or we could MacBook fanboy and say, it's an Apple, it just worked.
I will say this though. I will say this. I have a Dell all-in-one. I mean, granted, it's maxed out on everything. It's a very powerful machine that I do the recording and editing for the show on. But I do agree that generally, when I hear a guest has a Windows PC, I get a little nervous because I know that unless you're ready to dive into minutia, you're gonna have like these little like, oh, I'm recording, everything's great, and then you hit stop and you realize, nice, I recorded the whole thing through the webcam mic instead of my beautiful sitting there mic. So but yeah, it's good to have you. It's good that we're finally getting the recording going, and I'm excited to give a chat. So before I get too excited, why don't you give us a little bit of a bio so people know who you are and they know what you make and what you do?
Well, I'm Andrew. I've been a woodworker for many years now, I suppose. I'm progressing or trying to learn to be a little bit better. Recently I've been really trying to more focus on the artistic slash design aspect of things because I think that's where I lack. It's pretty easy to make a box and it's pretty easy to build a kitchen. I've done all of that type of stuff, but I'd like to move more into the studio furniture type of stuff, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Digitally creative stuff, I have a CNC, the laser, bought a 3D printer for my boy. We had a good conversation about that earlier.
We did actually have a good conversation about that. One of what we were actually talking about, and we can kind of loop it back in because now everyone's in on the joke. But how you don't realize how useful 3D printers actually are in something like a wood shop, and sometimes that connection doesn't get made until someone else makes it, and you see what they're doing, and you go, "Huh, I'm selling this short as a tool. It's not just a thing that makes cool trinkets off, Thingiverse or whatever. This actually has some practical purpose, particularly in a wood shop for jigs and tools. I was talking about the sander that I made, but I realized that I was going in the wrong direction because one of the most popular things I've ever made to sell is the jig I sell to put feet on cutting boards. Like it is literally the most popular thing that I've ever made in my shop, and it's 3D printed also. So it's kind of crazy how that one little thing can change so much for your shop.
Yeah, I don't know where we got cut off there, or what point I was explaining about the dust boot there on my CNC.
Hmm.
That's the biggest frustration with the dust boot on the Onefinity CNC that they originally put on is the front mount one, right?
Yeah.
And so then your hose is in the front. You got to pull it off every single time you want to change a bit. It's really annoying. And so I started 3D printing a rear mount one. And that's kind of my first dive into designing stuff for myself too, is making the adapter to go from that to my vacuum. And it was super satisfying to get something that worked right off the bat.
It's when you're getting acquainted with modeling stuff. The one good thing about 3D printing is it's cheap to just keep iterating over and over again. That's the whole point of 3D printing is you don't really make most people don't make finished products with 3D prints. They do rapid prototyping and you can just keep banging out prototypes until something fits. But man, that feeling of on the first try, like it's a major victory, a little fist pump, a little happy dance in the shop like, "Yes, I don't have to do this again. I don't have to adjust this. It's just good as it is."
Yeah. What blew my mind though is how accessible it is. It's not expensive.
No, it's
Like I
not an
bought
expensive thing at
the
all
printer I
anymore.
bought is $300. You know,
Mhm.
that's
And
not
that
too bad. And then a roll of filament. When I was, like, oh yeah, you can spend $25 on a roll of filament, and I was thinking like, oh well, how many things are you going to be able to print with this? But that's a lot of plastic.
a lot of filament. It's I mean, you can obviously there's a range. There's a really wide range in pricing on 3D print. I mean, there have been 3D printers at Aldi for $100. You know, you can at any given time in the United States. I don't know if you have Micro Center in Canada, but in the United States, Micro Center every once in a while they run a deal where you get a coupon, and that coupon will get you an Ender 3 for $100.
Oh,
And it's
geez.
like if you can't walk in the door for $100 on something, you're probably not that interested in it. Like that's practically impulse buying at that point.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And yeah, the filament, by the way, filament lasts forever. I had when I moved, I had to downsize my filament collection drastically. I probably had about 75 rolls of filament. And I realized that yes, I had a lot of colors and it was all very cool, but the reality of the situation is 90% of the stuff I was printing black and white anyway. So it's like, all right, run the last roll off, throw the rest of it away because I couldn't find anyone that wanted it. And black and white it is. But yeah, filament lasts forever. It's cheap, relatively cheap. You get pretty good results even from cheap filament. There are like my Prusa is like when I bought it was like $800. I bought it pre-assembled. And there are people, you know, there's you've probably seen the Bamboo Labs, the Carbon, which is a very expensive printer. It's like $1,500. And there's a lot of bells and whistles, right? But if you're willing to you want to just print some stuff, you don't need the bells and whistles. Like you don't need all the extra features. They're nice to have. They basically come down to creature comforts. It's a very accessible thing now. That's why when people say I can't afford a 3D printer, I'm like, I think you think it's more expensive than it actually is.
Yeah, they type that on their iPhone that they just upgraded last month.
For the third time in 3 years, too.
Exactly.
The one thing that I'm happy to hear that you're doing though. The one thing I'm happy that you are doing is you're not just settling for printing stuff that you download. You're actually learning how to 3D model stuff. You're getting comfortable with probably the most important piece of software if you have a 3D printer, which is Fusion 360. I mean, obviously Blender and ZBrush if you want to do sculpting, but for the most part, if you're going to do stuff with 3D printing, it almost stands to reason that you have to learn Fusion 360 at some point because if you learn anything else, you're just going to come back to having to learn Fusion 360 anyway. So it's good to
Yeah.
see that you caught that quick.
Well, it all comes down to like my brain, I suppose, or my neuroses. I grew up out in the middle of nowhere. Like when I was younger, our driveway was 6 miles long.
Oh my
So
god!
yeah, so
Did you grow up in Alberta also? Or
yeah, northern Alberta, a little
okay,
bit in Saskatchewan. So I've
explains
been.
a
I
lot.
mean, well, I grew up here. I've lived in Los Angeles. Lived in Portland. I've lived in British Columbia. I've been in a lot of places, but just kind of as the way I grew up, you have to learn how to fix it. You have to
Right.
do it yourself. And so I've always had that mentality of the reason I got my son a printer is because I want him to learn how to do things. And so if you just go onto Thingiverse, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and some of it is useful,
Hmm.
but the purpose of it is I have a problem, I need to fix a problem.
Right.
And that's why I got into woodworking. Like I wanted to fix a problem. I That's why I bought my son a forge. Because with all of the tools that I have,
Hmm.
if I can't fix it, it's probably unfixable at this point.
Right. Well, you know what I love? I love the two of the biggest problems that humanity and society face, which is poverty and isolation, tend to be the things that motivate makers the most. Because for me, growing up, my dad, he was a carpenter, but a lot of the stuff that he did, he would probably have preferred to not be doing himself. He didn't want to make cabinets, he didn't want to make furniture, he didn't want to make coffee tables, but we didn't have the money for it. So I was like, well, I guess I'm making this stuff for myself because that's it. It was the same thing. My dad was a fixer also. It was because we didn't have the money to call a guy. There was no guy. He's the guy.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and I think the flip side of that same thing, this is kind of where again, my personal flag slash soapbox is one of the reasons that I do stuff like this. One of the reasons I build furniture rather than just buy IKEA crap is because I want it to last forever, you know?
Hmm.
And if you're stuck in that mentality of, oh, I can just go down to the store and buy it, you're outsourcing your freedom, you're outsourcing your ability to do anything to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And as COVID shows us, that bites you in the back
Yeah.
when the supply chain falls. Or alternatively, when your light bulb breaks, you have no idea how to fix it, and you have no ability to problem solve or to learn. So yeah, I think you're right on the maker mentality, though, that's half the motivation, at least it is for me.
I think it's funny. You mentioned like light bulbs. I mean, it's one of those things there. Every once in a while they'll show an article. They'll show an article and it'll be like, 85% of millennials call a superintendent to change a light bulb. And it's just like why? Like I get that sometimes you just want the guy to take care of the thing, but sometimes people just legitimately don't know, like, they don't know how to basic skills, like, don't know how to change a battery on a car, don't know how to change a circuit breaker, don't even know how to tell which circuit breaker is a problem. Like, if they could blow a breaker, you could hand them a flashlight and open the cabinet for them, and they'll look at it going, "I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do here." Like, I don't know, I mean, maybe we just come from a different generation where that was, like, basic life skill stuff, but it's like it feels like I don't know, I'm almost sad when I see someone my age who doesn't know how to I mean, look, I'm not gonna say I'm a mechanic, I don't do anything on my car, but I could change a flat tire, I can change a battery, I could change my headlights. I've changed my headlights on many occasions, stuff like that, like basic maintenance stuff. Give them a thing of windshield wiper fluid and say, "Put this in." And they'll stand there and look like, "I don't know where this goes." Like, I don't know.
That was actually one of the first things that I did that impressed my wife before she was my wife. We were friends for years before we even started dating, but
Mhm.
her headlights were out on her car, and she had a couple male friends who were trying to fix it, and they couldn't fix it, couldn't figure it out, blah blah blah. Anyway, I happened to stop by, and she's like, "Oh, well, maybe. Do you know how to do this?" And so I walked out, and I was like, "Yeah, you just go like this." And I pulled the plug out, put the new light in, put it in. It was done in like 3 minutes, and she's
You're
like, "Wow, those guys didn't know." And me, somewhat rudely, I suppose, pridefully said, and I said, "Yeah, that's because I'm a real man."
Hey, it worked. It worked, you landed all right.
Yeah, that's
It's
a whole nother story.
it is I I think there's something to be said for, like I said, I get that there's kinda like a fuzzy line where there's, like, basic life skills and things that okay, I understand, like, if somebody doesn't know how to change their brakes, I understand, that involves tools and knowledge and training, whatever, or change their own oil. I understand, like, them not people not knowing that kinda stuff. Man, there's just some basic things where it's just like, how do you not know that? Like, how do you not know I don't know. Yeah, headlights are a good one because the hardest part of headlight changing is usually figuring out how to get to the back of the headlight. It's
Yeah,
usually especially if you
on
have
the
a
one
Honda.
side.
Anyone that has a Honda is nodding their head right now going, "Yep, he's 100% right about that." But yeah,
Yeah, no, my wife and
it's
I, we're into the self sufficiency thing. Like we grow a big
Mhm.
garden in the summer and we can our own food, that type of
Oh, that's
stuff.
great.
But a few years ago, we got asked to teach a class about just basic cooking skills, and we had these people, and this the one lady. She was older than me now, so she was in her 50s, like she was middle age, late middle age. She did not know how to cut an onion, like didn't know how to peel an
Mm,
onion. Like,
mm,
are you kidding me? It's like, how did you
yeah.
get to this point in life and not know how to do that?
I know people that are older than me that they literally, they'll talk about how expensive food is, and you're like, "Well, where do you shop?" It's like, "Oh, I order." Like, "What wait, what do you mean you order?" Like, "You order what?" "Oh, like, all my meals, I don't cook." "Do you not, like to cook?" Or, "No, I don't know how to cook, I never learned." How? How? I was cooking dinner, not to pull the, get off my lawn, uphill to school both ways type thing, but I was cooking for my family. I was like 12 years old. My parents both worked. I was cooking dinner for my family at 12 years old. Like, I may not have been the greatest cook in the world, but I could cook dinner for a family of 4 at 12 years old. I could make it work, and I've gotten to the point now where, my dinner routine. I mean, I live alone in my own apartment. So like if I get home from work at, 6:30, I need a dinner that I can knock out quick, and I am very efficient in the kitchen. I'm a master. And I just take that skill for granted. And then when I see particularly my guy friends have no idea what to do in the kitchen. None. They are lost. Like if it's not take something out of the freezer and put it in the microwave, they're lost. And it's again, life skills. It's
Yeah.
all about life skills. But
Yep.
and and I love that you're teaching those skills. I love that those skills are getting taught because I feel like the only way to counter that nobody knows how to do these things is to teach these things. Like when people realize that they can do it, it's like, why am I not doing this? I can do this. It's approachable now. So,
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if you've seen have you seen that what's his name, Luke Wilson movie, Idiocracy?
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the dumbest movie I've
Water
ever seen in my
from the
life.
toilet.
Yeah, that's a really stupid movie, but I am so terrified that that's the way the world is going. That's one of the reasons that I want my son to know stuff, and so
Mhm.
he's Luke Wilson character. He's not the idiots.
Kids, it's weird with kids too because kids, I my ex-wife was a teacher, and she was her mindset, even though she's not in any way a maker, her creativity is basically in the kitchen. She's a very good cook. She was a really good cook. Um, she would have students and she would talk, her kids were all in, obviously they're all young, so they're all into video games and like YouTube and whatever. And, these kids are like, oh, I want to get paid. I want to get paid, working with video games. And she was like, well, if you work really hard in school and you get really good at it and you can learn how to code, you can actually write your own video games. And they're like, oh, we don't want to make them. We want to play them.
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh, whatever." And you hear it so often. It's like, "Wow, you guys, you can make your own thing. You can do what you wanna do." And it's just like, I don't know, it feels like it's almost beaten out of people now. Like, you can't do that. I think that's why when people like particularly IT people, computer people, people that have desk jobs, when they discover making, it's such a, like, whoa moment for them because, like, "Oh, I didn't like the furniture I saw, but I can make my own furniture, or I can I don't have to go to Michael's." I mean, I went to get something framed once at Michael's, and they wanted $225. I'm like, "You know what? As much as I don't wanna make a picture frame, I'm gonna make a picture frame." Like, I hate making picture frames, I really do, but for $225, I will make a picture frame.
yeah. I'll
So
make picture frames all day long for that.
yeah, I'll make 3 of them, sell 2 of them, it's like, hey, and I'll sell them for less than $225, but
Yeah.
the way that we met was actually really interesting. Speaking about your son and kids, because I am a sucker, and everyone that knows me will vouch for this. Anyone that listens to this podcast and has known me over the last few years knows that I am a sucker for charity. Somebody does something for charity, even if it's my last, $5 in my pocket, I will take it. I will take it and I will spend it to help support the charity because I just respect people doing cool things for charity. And your son was doing something so cool for charity. And that's how I got to know you. And it was, I have a soft spot. People that listen know I had cancer. So when I hear cancer, it's like instantly I'm wide awake. Like I'm full alert. Like, what are we doing? How do I help? So, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it's important. I think it's actually really important for people to hear the story and recognize your boy for what he did because it was really really cool.
Yeah, well, it all started. He wanted to learn blacksmithing,
Hmm.
and so rather than spend a whole bunch of money on a course, me being me, I just bought him a forge for his birthday, and so he bought a forge and anvil and all that jazz, and he started mangling little bits of metal, and he ended up turning bending this little piece of round rod into one of those cancer ribbons, right?
Hmm.
And so kind of give you a little bit of backstory on the cancer thing. My brother passed away from a form of cancer before he was born, but he was he always has known that he missed his uncle and or missed out on his uncle and
Mm.
blah blah blah. And then well, wasn't more than 4 or 5 months before that, our neighbor had passed away from cancer,
Oh Jesus.
and I mean his wife actually just passed away 3 months ago from cancer as well. So it's been
Good Lord.
so he's known a few people, but anyway, so he has this little ribbon, and he comes up to me, and I mean, this is like the third thing he's ever made, right? And the other two were just mangled bits of metal. And he says, "Hey, this looks like a cancer ribbon." Like, yeah. So, well, do you think we could sell these and do a cancer fundraiser? And so I said, "Yeah, we could. Do I want to?" In my head, I said, "No, heck no, I don't want to. This sounds like a lot of work." Anyway, but trying to be a semi-adequate father, I said, "Well, whatever, sure, let's do it. What's your goal? What do you want to raise?" And he said $1,000. And so we sat down, and I pulled out my phone, and I videoed a little chat with him and said, "Hey, my son wants to raise money for cancer research. Here's the thing: we're selling these for $10 a piece plus shipping. Uh, you know, here you go. Do you want to buy one?" And we immediately had a whole bunch of people reach out and say, "Yeah, and we'll buy one." And I think actually the biggest credit probably has to go to like Keith
Mm-hmm.
Blackthorn Concepts and Tony Woodland Iron and the Working Hands podcast. They really flogged it for him, but
That's how
that's
I
where a
found out
lot of
about it, actually.
yeah, I think the biggest credit goes to them. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he ended up making, forget how many he ended up making, but he made 100 and something.
That's incredible.
And yeah, he ended up with some matching donations from some companies. He ended up donating a little over 2 grand,
That's
which was
fantastic.
good.
And how old? He's 10, right? I think. Is,
He'll turn 13 this year.
okay, so he's gonna turn 13 this year.
Yeah,
So
so he
okay,
was he was 12 last
he's
year. He
12.
just turned 12. Yeah, and then this year he had so much fun doing it. He wants to do it again. So
Nice. That's awesome. Is he thinking of doing the same thing, like doing the ribbons again, or is he gonna come up with something else?
he wants to make a knife, and so we've been talking about
Ooh,
it a little bit. So I think what we might end up doing is, as I'll order some knife making material from I don't know.
maritime.
Yeah,
Seems like everybody
probably
gets it from
maritime.
maritime anyway.
Lawrence Maritime Knife Supply. I'll order some stuff from him and get maybe make a couple knives. And I think maybe what we'll do is we'll raffle one of them off. Although it won't be a
Awesome.
raffle because an international raffle would be illegal and we don't have a license. So what we'll do is we'll collect donations and then
Hmm.
we'll randomly give the knife to somebody of our choosing.
Mm,
And we won't say how we choose, but
right.
it'll probably be a draw.
And it totally won't be a raffle. Totally
It
not a
totally
raffle.
won't be a raffle. It'll
No.
be people donating and us giving away a knife to a random person.
Right. All random, all above board. Nothing to be sorry
Exactly.
about. That's fantastic. I love I love that his it makes me so happy. I feel like the jerk gene skipped like a generation of children because the younger kids now, the younger ones, like the kids your son's age, look at the world a lot differently. They're not as self-absorbed like the really like the 10 to 13 that are 10 to 13 now, right? They really do want to make an impact on the world. It's not just, oh, I want to do a cool thing. It's like I can't imagine, as much as I love what he's doing, I can't imagine being his age and making something cool and going, I want to make this cool thing again and again and again and again and again to support cancer research. Like it wouldn't even click in my head. And meanwhile, there's your son just doing this awesome thing. It's fantastic.
Well, to be fair, when it came to actually writing the check for the donation,
Hmm.
he was he had a moment of hesitation there for sure. He was like, "That's $1,000." Like, yeah, it's $1,000. I could buy all sorts of stuff. I'm like, yeah, you could,
Hmm.
but you promised that you would give this away, and if you don't give it away, then you've scammed people out of their money. And he's like, "Oh, well, I guess I have to." But he had a moment of hesitation. So he's not a perfect angel.
No, but he's a kid. He's a kid, right? But did end up doing the right thing, and he did come up with the idea. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. Like I can't imagine. Like I mean, credit to you and your wife for raising a kid that's got his head on that straight too, because that doesn't come from a kid on his own. Kid has to learn that from their parents. So
Well, it is definitely equal parts credit between me and my wife. My
Mhm.
wife is 100% accredited for being a great example, and I'm 100% accredited for being a bad example and what not to be. So between the two of us, we've raised a normal kid.
Everything in the world needs balance. There's a reason yin and yang are the symbol of Shinto. There's a reason that it happens that way. So, no, that's fantastic. I'm really excited about him doing another fundraiser. That's just absolutely fantastic, especially knives. Like people, has he made any knives yet, or is he one? This is going to be his first.
He's made some bent pieces of metal that we've put on the grinder.
Okay,
That's the
that's better
extent.
than I've done.
We put a couple edges on a couple pieces of metal, but nothing
Okay,
of any worth.
if I one day I'll show. I think I have it somewhere on my Instagram from when I took it. I took a blacksmithing class, and I wanted to make a marking knife for woodworking. And I this thing just looks like a tongue depressor with a point on the end of it. Like it's sad. Like it's truly sad. So when I see somebody that can actually make something, I respect that tremendously. I can't blacksmith anything to save my life. It's not my skill set. It's just not. Um, do you so you got him the forge. Do you find yourself dabbling in it at all, or is that his thing and you just leave it for him?
I do it with him
Okay.
when we light it up. I'll if I'm working in the shop and he's out, I'll light it up for him. We have a little one of those portable garage tarp shelter type
Mm-hmm.
things that it's
Mm-hmm.
set up in beside my shop, and so I'll light it for him. And if there's something that I'm interested in, I'll have it in the fire as well while it's going. But I don't light it up by myself.
Gotcha. That is I like that he's pursuing something that takes that much skill and that much time to get good at, and he's starting it so young. Like he'll be one of those guys on Forged in Fire at like 17, 18 years old. Skinny. There's always one kid like that, gets out there, he's 17 years old. I've been forging since I'm, 8 years old. And my daddy got me my first forge in the backyard. It's like all of a sudden he's making beautiful knives.
Well, I'd say he started watching what's his name, Alex Steele, when he was
Hmm.
I well, it was before we moved back to Alberta, so he would have been 7 years old,
That's a
so
hell of a
8 years
place to
old, somewhere
start.
in that neighborhood. But
That's a hell of a role model to have. We're very lucky to have those kind of people in the community too. There's so many cool like knife makers and stuff. I mean, God, Adam Coonrad is, accessible. Like you could go on Instagram right now and message a Forged in Fire champion. And
yeah,
he'll
actually,
answer.
well, he bought one of those ribbons as well, actually, and so
Oh wow.
yeah, we chat back and forth every once in a while, and we he's my boy started watching Forged in Fire a couple weeks ago, and so I messaged Adam and asked him, hey, what episode were you on? And he told me the episode, and he says, yeah, when he watches it, let me know, and I'll chat with him about it. And it's like, yeah, he's a cool dude. I like Adam.
He was really cool. I actually saw him at Maker Camp, and he was walking by, and I wanted to say hi, but he looked like he was like really focused on whatever he was walking in with purpose. Like he wasn't just kind of wandering, and he had a knife in his hand and he was just walking like, "Arr," like, and afterwards I was like, "Hey, I saw you at Maker Camp. I didn't want to stop you. You look busy." He goes, "No, you can always stop me and say hi." I'm like, "Dude, you don't startle people with knives. It's like rule number 1. You were going somewhere and I wasn't about to startle you." But yeah, it's amazing how many cool people are in this community. It's amazing also, credit where it's due. It's amazing how many cool people outside of the people I would normally talk to I've met through either, the people that listen to the Working Hands podcast or like the chat room for Makeshift. There's just a lot of people in this circle of people. Outside of my group, I'll go into that group. It's like, oh, these are like only. I mean, I knew some of the people in that group, but a bunch of new people. I think I really got to know Ed in that group. Seeing because everyone always talked about how funny Ed was, and I go in that group. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's hysterical. Yeah, I get it. It's the patented smartass of the group.
Yeah, yeah. That's the weirdest thing about the social media stuff, though. Like here I am, like an introvert in Southern Alberta, and I have a dozen friends in New Jersey or whatever, right?
Right.
it really messes with the ad targeting algorithms all the time because I keep getting these things for like such and such in New Jersey. I'm like, this is completely irrelevant. You've totally wasted your ad spend, but
Hey, you
more
do you,
power to
boo. I mean, I see it. I have seen so many communities form around niche interests, especially like my girlfriend she has a online radio show, and it's a very niche radio show. Like it's mainly focused. She does a request show every Wednesday night, but the channel that she does it on is kind of focused on like 80s and 90s pop, and particularly like boy bands, New Kids on the Block and their ilk. And the
the worst
community
form of music on the planet, if you ask my opinion.
hey, I don't judge what people listen to because I listen to my fair share of crazy stuff too, but I will say this, there's so many people in that community, and it's such a tight-knit community, and they're all over the country. Like they were just doing they did a replay of one of the shows, and it aired last night at 11 p.m. and I'm like, "Oh wow, you're airing replays of that show at 11 p.m. That's late." And she goes, "Yeah, we have plenty of listeners on the West Coast." I'm like, "What?" Like, that's awesome. Like, you don't expect that. And people bond over the craziest things. And everything I've done in the last few years, it feels like there's a whole community around it. It's kind of crazy, actually. I think that's why Reddit is successful and Discord, places where you can kind of collect people that are interested in the same stuff you're in. And that's what makes the maker community great too, because you can always find somebody that has a skill that you want to learn, and then pick their
Yeah,
brain until they bleed.
yeah, and people, I think that's one of the biggest things that like all the COVID lockdown nonsense made people realize is that people really do want connection.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to just be the generic, gray suit that goes to work and comes home and watches TV. They want to connect to somebody, and they want to be proud of the fact that they paint miniature Warhammer figures, and they want to communicate with people about that, or they want to be proud about the fact that they do crazy joinery projects or make cutting boards or 3D print, whatever it is, whatever they're into. People really want that connection.
Hmm. Yeah, especially when you're bonding over a skill, and it's like I always use the Frank Shamrock explanation. Train with two people, one who's better than you, and then one who you can teach. And because that's where you're going to benefit the most. You're going to learn from the guy who's way better than you, and you're going to teach the person who's coming in behind you. And every time I help someone out, and anyone who I've helped out can verify this, I always say the same thing. I didn't get to where I am on my own, and I will never keep knowledge to myself. If I have it, I am perfectly happy sharing everything. And I will readily admit I don't have a lot of knowledge that the average person in our space doesn't have. But the little tiny bits of specialized knowledge I have, I'm perfectly happy sharing them. I love sharing it. That's all I can give back to the community. I have two things I can offer: the little tricks that I've learned over the years and this show. So that's it. That's what I do. I give you the podcast. I introduce you to new interesting people, and I teach you how to do shit in Illustrator. That's what I do. That's my place in the world.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like if you have a big enough community around you, you don't need to know everything
Right.
because you know the guy that knows this tip, and you know the guy that knows
Hmm.
that tip, and you know the guy that knows that tip, and combine those three tips together, suddenly you have an expert,
Yeah.
right? And no
Yeah.
no one person is the expert, but you can still have access to the expert.
The hive mind is frightening in our space in general, because I have never had a question that somebody couldn't answer. And it's wild when you think you have the only question that's never been asked in the history of making, and like you ask it and 20 people are like, here's five different ways to do this, and here's the three that'll never work, so don't do these. It's like, wow, you guys have done everything. Like, especially when you're starting something new, it's super intimidating. Like, if you've been following my Instagram, you see I've been playing with leafing a lot, like gold and copper and silver leaf, like really trying to get good at. In fact, I tried something new today and it worked perfectly. Like, this is the
Uh,
cleanest thing I've ever done. Um, and basically what I did was I put the leaf on the MDF before cutting it on the laser. I didn't know you could do that, but I wanted to try it, and boy, did it work good. So guess
I
what's
made a
coming in
nice.
a YouTube video?
Well, that's what I was scrolling through your feed here this morning, trying to remember everything that I've seen, and the wall art one that you have there, that looks
Mhm.
really cool.
Yeah,
Is
that
that
one sold 4 hours on on
wow?
my Instagram feed. And again, it's like, okay, so randomly out of nowhere yesterday, I get a message on Instagram. Somebody needed a little advice on leafing because of a technique that I did for. Let's see, can I show it? It's over here. This piece right here, that's gold leafed. It was basically from the movie Hellraiser. It was the three different patterns on the puzzle box in a long form, and I gold leafed it on, and I did it the same way this person was going to do it. And it was like, hey, I saw you. I remember you doing something like this. How did this work for you? I'm like, oh, no problem. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. Good luck. I can't wait to see what you do. So it's great. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, and that's where I've always kind of struggled in the past, though, is like I said in one of our past conversations that didn't get recorded. I or maybe it did get recorded. I don't remember.
Who
But
knows?
yeah, I grew up super independent, right?
Hmm.
And I've always been the mindset of I want to figure it out for myself.
Right.
But there's so much to figure out.
Yeah.
You always have always had the dream of being the Renaissance man, like the modern day Leonardo da Vinci.
Hmm.
But there's so much to know now that you just can't possibly do that.
Right.
However, like you ask the guy, hey, I saw this technique, and you can accelerate your learning so much by just
Sure.
asking somebody and saying, hey, how do you do this? And they'll give you the technique, and suddenly you're 10 steps ahead of where you would have been had you tried to
Yeah.
figure it out yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for learning through failure, but there's also something to be said for getting rid of the easy failures and not experiencing them. Jumping over the initial, especially when you're first learning something, because those initial failures sometimes they're going to stop you dead in your tracks. Like you're going to hit those first few failures and go, "This sucks. I don't want to do this." And you're going to quit. I mean, I don't I the running joke with me has always been resin 3D printing. I literally hate resin 3D printing because I've had three other than the one I have now that works. I've had three other resin 3D printers and I never got a good print out of any of them. And I just got so frustrated. I'm like, I know how to 3D print stuff. I'm good at 3D printing. I understand it all. And for some reason, this doesn't click for me. And then finally, I was watching a video of an unboxing of a printer, and the guy did one thing in the setup that I'd never done. And I was like, son of a bitch. That's why it's never worked. And the next one I got worked. Why? Because he's probably failed do it with the same way I've failed. The thing moves up and down 50 times. And, by the time it's visible, you're like, oh, nothing printed. Oh, good. I get to clean it out again and start from scratch. So,
Yeah, the other side of that same coin though is like I've been doing this hand cut joinery practice thing, right? Trying to get
mhm.
better at hand cut joinery, and there are certain skills that you cannot learn from just tips and tricks from people telling you.
Sure.
You just have to muscle through and do it. And hand cut joinery is one of them. It's just you
Yes.
have to have the muscle memory, you have to have the muscle control to do it. And so I've been posting these videos on YouTube and on social media, and I get comments all the time. Well, you're obviously an amateur. Well, duh, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Not only am I an amateur, but I say in the title that this is a practice joint and this is my second time or whatever, right? But then you get these people that they may or may not know what they're doing,
Hmm.
but they tell you the tips and tricks. Well, you need to use a knife line. You need to use this. You need to use that. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm doing all of these things. It's muscle memory. This
Yeah.
is, you just have to do it. There is
Sure.
no tip or trick to get better at this except for doing it.
Action
Yeah.
action goes a long way, especially with the stuff that we do. Like it's, I've said this too. Like I don't use hand planes. Why? Because I've never really had any luck with them. But have I really put in the effort? No. I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, everything I've had difficulty with is usually me getting bored and not wanting to put any more effort into it, before I end up punching out on it. So,
Yeah, that's my problem is like I suffer from the maker ADD, I guess,
Mhm.
right? Like you want
Mhm.
to do everything, but then I'm also a perfectionist, so I always want to do it perfectly. And so there's
Ooh,
this
that's a
constant battle that turns into like this procrastination nightmare of, well, I need to do this
Well,
first, but then I had
I
yeah.
love that. So Ed and I kind of talked about this last week. We talked about the mindset of, not needing to be an expert on something. And I think that's, I hate to say it, and I'm only speaking for me, maybe I'm speaking for Ed, maybe I'm speaking for anyone else that I've had this discussion with, but I feel like that's the way to cope with maker ADD, is to just go, I am not going to be perfect at this, but I'm going to be competent at it, and that's going to have to be good enough. Because if I get to the point where I have to be an expert at everything, I'm going to be 65 years old with one skill.
Well, yeah, and that's it's so true because you can let the perfectionism stop you from doing it. Like
Mhm.
don't let perfect be the enemy of done, right? Like you've heard
Yeah.
that before.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is 99.9% of people who look at your work are going to go, yeah, it looks great. I don't see any
Yeah.
problems until you point out all the problems.
Which we all do, and that was one of the first things, that was one of the best things I got out of Steve Ramsey's woodworking course, which is what got me started as a woodworker. In one of the videos, he actually says, the worst thing that we do, like, it's like, it was like one of the is like what not to do as a new woodworker. And one of the first things he said is lead with the flaws. Like, don't do that. And I realize I still do it. And I don't even, like, it's subconscious. Like, I don't even think about it. It's like, hey, look at this beautiful cutting board. I'm sorry the juice groove isn't perfectly straight and the feet aren't in perfect position and the sanding isn't amazing. Like, no, how about, "Hey, look at this beautiful cutting board. What do you think?" Because the average person is gonna look at it and go, "Damn, dude, that's beautiful." Even other makers have looked at stuff that I've gone, I made a cutting board that was almost flawless, almost flawless. And the only problem with it was, for whatever reason, when I put the juice groove on it with the CNC, it was uneven. Like, it was deeper in the front than it was at the back. I started calling that a feature, because it makes the juice run to the front of the board. It's almost brilliant.
It's exactly what I was going to say is that that's a genius move right there because it just that all of your stuff runs down to one corner. And so
Yes.
that's where you put your paper towels.
Mhm.
But
And
that's a design feature.
I never brought it up, and when I saw it in action, that's what happened. The paper towels were all in the front where it would run to. So, like, it was like, "Oh, yeah, it's channeling all the juice off the front of the board. It's perfect. Look at that." And had I called that a flaw, I would have felt stupid, because it's actually a really nice feature, and now I'm trying to replicate it, and I'm like, "Well, how the hell do I get the router in deeper over here and make it look decent?" Like, it was an accident. It was a great accident, so yeah, you're right, though. We do yeah, perfection is the boogeyman that kills all of us. It really is. It's the one that's hiding in every workshop, the one that you try to satisfy and can't, and get really upset when you can't. And
Well,
perfection is
that's
not
why I
required.
started posting the joinery videos in the
Mhm,
first place. Is just because in my mind I'm like, oh, I don't want to post this until I'm perfect at it, and then I
mhm,
don't practice. And so then I thought to myself, if I just post this and say this is a practice one, and I'm going to do this on a regular basis, it gives me an outside um, point of motivation to say, yeah, I need to get this done and
mhm,
actually get better. And like I just posted one today, cutting a sunrise dovetail, and it's still not perfect, but it's way better than the first one I did.
mhm.
And I mean, it still sucks, and I wouldn't put it on a piece of furniture that I was going to sell to anybody. But yeah, and so sometimes the community aspect is motivating, and then we end up focusing on like the one guy that says, "Why you suck?" Like, who cares? You don't
Yeah.
matter anyway.
Like, if you're making cutting boards, you may not want to start out by watching, like, Bro and Wood, for example, and the crazy inlays that guy does. You may want to start with a guy who's gonna help you get your basics down. You know, I think that's the other thing. I think that's a good point, because that is something we definitely do. We don't have a skill. We go through YouTube to find the skill. We watch the people who are exceptional at the skill, and then what do? We start and we're like, I'm nowhere near as good as that guy. Is this even worth doing? You have that moment where it's like, I don't know if I even want to do this. Like, this is worth putting in the effort for. So,
Yeah,
have
it's
you
very
have
true.
you have you punched out on anything that you've started learning and just gone, this is not for me? I mean, for me, I've always used the example of blacksmithing because I wanted to do it, then did it, and I was like, I don't like doing this. Like, this is not for me. Have you had anything like that? Like anything in your history where you're like, I want to learn that or I want to do that, and then you start doing it, and it's like, nah, that's not my thing.
I there's well, it depends on what you mean. Am I going to run away from it and never touch it again?
It doesn't have
No.
to be that extreme, but is it just something that where you're like, this is not for me? Like, if I have to, maybe if I have to, I'll do it.
Yes and no. I'm like I said, I want to be the Renaissance man.
Hmm.
Like I want to be able to do all of that stuff, but there
Hmm.
are things that I am really interested in, but I'm not skilled at, and I haven't pursued. But I want to, but I don't want to. Drawing, like drawing, painting, that
Hmm.
type of stuff, I'm not very good at. I would like to be. Carving, I'm terrible at. That's a skill that I would like to be, but I also don't want to because I suck so bad. It's a waste of time. Um, I did a pottery class as a date with my wife one time.
I
We
always
had
thought
like
that looked
7
like so much
classes,
fun.
and oh, it was really fun, and it's something that like, oh, that would be really cool, but I don't want to invest the time either, right?
Hmm.
That's where like the whole matrix plug into the back of your head nonsense would be kind of nice, because
Right.
there's certain things that I don't want to invest the time into learning, but would
Hmm.
be interesting to be good at.
Mm. Well,
So, but nothing that I've actively said, yeah, I've tried this out, this sucks.
that's interesting.
Uh,
I can, I always use the example of blacksmithing, but now that I think about it, that probably is the only example of that I have for me, where it's like that was the thing that I did, and I was like, I don't enjoy this. This is not my thing. Whereas there have been a lot of things that I've tried and gone, I'll do that again if I have to. Okay, I'll give you a good one. I'll give you a good easy one. I don't love doing resin inlays on cutting boards. I just don't. I find it to be one of those things where it's so finicky that like you make a beautiful board and then the inlay can actually ruin it if it doesn't work out. And I've actually had that happen on two boards where I made the board, it was beautiful, and then the inlay just ate it. And I'm like, son of a, and you don't get to erase that. You don't get to plane it off. You got to start from scratch again. And
I'll give you that. I don't even know if it's on my feed. I made a river inlay or river epoxy river thing
mhm,
one time as a drawer fronts and a built-in cabinets in my walk-in closet,
mhm.
and it turned out pretty good. But I have zero desire to do it again. Yeah, like epoxy, I'm with you there. I have like the whole epoxy river everything. There's some cool art out there, and there's some
Mhm,
phenomenal people
mhm.
who did, and I follow a few of them. But yeah, I have no desire to do it.
I feel like doing resin, like the one thing I do with resin that I never have a fail with is just I've been doing it the longest is jewelry, right? I can do resin jewelry like crazy, never have a failure. But like when I start combining resin and woodworking, it starts to get to be this thing where it's like, wow, you have to put all this work into the woodworking part of it and then do the resin part. And it's like the resin part is, I mean, I don't care who you are, anyone even that works with resin extensively is going to tell you resin, even when you know what you're doing, is unpredictable. Any tiny little thing can go wrong with it. And man, I hate putting the hours into the wood part of it and then having the resin part of it kill the wood part. Like I would rather, if a customer asks me to do it, I will do it. Or if I have a really cool artistic idea, which I've had, I will suck it up and just do it. But if I have my choice, never. It's just never gonna happen.
Yeah, the only time I use a resin epoxy in my shop is as a glue.
It's a lot of 5-minute double syringe packages sitting around your shop.
100%.
Do you have any skills that you're like excited to learn? Like, is there anything? Because I know that there's a couple for me. Like, I'd really like to learn how to weld. I'd really like to learn the like proper welding technique. I've never even held a welder in my hand. Like, I would really like to learn that because I think it could take some of the skills I already have to like the next level. So that for me is mine. But do you have any skills that you'd like to learn or that you like given the perfect situation, I can go take a class today that's going to teach me how to do this. Do you have any skills on that list?
I would actually put welding on that list as well. Like I have welded some, but my
Mhm.
welds kind of look like chicken poop on metal. So
Hey, as
they're
Jimmy says,
pretty
a
terrible.
welder in paint make me the grinder I ain't. No, wait, a grinder in paint make me the welder I ain't. That's it.
Something like that, anyway. Yeah. Now welding, carving. Like I would. Well, this was going to be my thing of the or thing that I'm obsessed with, or thing of the week, whatever you call it. Jonas Olson Woodcraft. I don't know if you've ever seen him on YouTube.
No.
He does some phenomenal like carving, like sculptural carvings. That's like that would be cool. Like being able to do that, learning like good carving sculptural techniques like that would be really good.
Okay.
That would be a skill that I would like.
I'm always amazed when I see what people are doing with like power carving. Like, I know, not to plug their sponsor because they're not a sponsor of this podcast, but like Working Hands has Sabretooth as a sponsor. And it's like, when at Maker Camp this year, I got to see the power carving that was going on at Maker Camp and looking at the tent and watching stuff. And I'm like, man, like just an angle grinder and maybe like a pendant grinder, like a Dremel or some kind of rotary tool, those two tools, and you can make anything. And then
Yeah,
I'm like, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking what you're thinking too is like, you don't have that skill set, dude. You're not just going to take a log and all of a sudden do the kind of stuff that these people are doing. That's a lot of effort that they put in. They didn't get this way on day one, but yeah, it's that's a good one. Carving is a good one because you can do a lot once you know how to carve. Because if you know how to carve, you know how to carve anything really. It's just a matter of adjusting your technique.
yeah. There's a few guys on my Instagram feed that I follow, and they do like little figurines and stuff all the
Hmm.
time. It's like that'd be a cool skill to have because it and like power carving or like chip carving, knife carving, because it's something you can sit down in front of the campfire and you can whittle away and
Sure.
make something. You know,
Yeah. I watched one of my favorite Instagrammers. He was actually on this show a couple of years ago. Um, and he's like a loose, I would call him a loosely connected friend, is Steve Casino. And one of the things he does, like he's known for painting peanuts, that's his thing. But one of the things he does that really is mind blowing to me is he does a series of things called he calls the series infested. So he'll take like a Coke can and he'll cut away some of the Coke can and then he'll sculpt with polymer clay a creature coming out of the can. And that's the whole piece. And it's the stuff he does is just so incredible. In fact, April 1st, I'm very much looking forward to this, but April 1st at the Kraus Gallery on the Lower East Side, Manhattan, he's doing his first New York gallery opening. And you can bet that I'm going to be there because I want to finally meet him in person because I've learned a lot watching him. Number two, I want to see his stuff in person because his stuff is just mind-boggling. He did one a couple of years ago. He did the Beatles on Tic Tacs. Like he hand painted the Beatles on Tic Tacs. He had like 5 little Tic Tacs with the Beatles on it. It's just
that's
super
crazy.
talented guy, just freakishly talented. But to learn how to do the stuff he does with polymer clay and the modeling and the sculpting, like to me, like that's a skill. I have a lot of polymer clay. I would love to learn that skill. Love to learn it. Um,
Yeah, I can make or, kindergartner snakes really good. That's like my skill level with clay mold.
I challenged myself last year. Emmett from Dead Rise Woodcraft, he did a charity thing, and it was he did a maker chess set, which was really really cool. He had 32 makers make the pieces, and then he made the board, and the only guidelines for the pieces were that they fit on the board. So I was like, okay, cool. So what am I going to make mine out of? And I actually made it out of polymer clay and I turned it on a drill because I didn't have a lathe. So I chucked a threaded rod into it, glued it in, chucked that into the drill, spun it, and I carved into it with my Dremel running and holding my drill. And I turned my drill into a lathe to make a pawn out of polymer clay. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever made. I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe I did this. So,
Yeah, it's those types of things where you're like, oh hey, I didn't let the fact that I didn't have a $5,000 lathe stop me from doing
mhm.
something cool.
I feel like I've had this discussion with people, but I think I'd love your opinion on this because when people say, you always hear, especially on the bigger podcasts with the more experienced makers, the guys that really have the money, they'll always say something like they get comments on YouTube all the time. It's like, oh, it must be nice. Like if I had that level of tool, I could do that too. And I always say, like, yeah, you probably couldn't. Because if you think that the tool is what's stopping you from doing the making part, you're probably not the person that's going to be making anything anyway. Like, I think that's the trick. I think that's the great deceit with these people is that they don't really want to make anything. It's not the tools that's stopping them. So,
Oh, I totally agree with you. It's, I mean, the reality of it is every single tool that you have is essentially just a tool, is just a chisel,
mhm,
right? Like you should be able to do everything with a chisel because a table saw is just a rotating bunch of tiny chisels. A
mhm,
jointer is just a big rotating chisel. A bandsaw is just another chisel, right?
right.
That being said, I mean, I guess I, not to brag, but I am the guy with the tools though, right? Like I have a saw stop, I have a nice lathe, I have a nice bandsaw, I have an 8-inch jointer, I have a drum sander, CNC, all that stuff. But but it doesn't. I've also had the cheap crap table saw.
Right. You didn't start there. That's the
No,
thing, right?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't start there. The thing that the nice tools do for you is they make it easier, and that's
Mhm.
all. You're, and that's one of the reasons why like carving and stuff interests me. It's because as much as me as a furniture maker say IKEA crap furniture, IKEA makes phenomenal furniture.
Mhm.
It's phenomenal what they create,
Mhm.
but they're confined by a machine,
Right.
right? Like it's what they make has to fit certain parameters. Whereas if you're going into sculptural furniture and sculpture in general, the only thing that's confining it is the mind of the person.
Mhm.
And so that's you're right when people say, well, I could do that with if I had those tools. No, you couldn't,
You probably
because you
couldn't.
didn't have the idea.
Yeah.
um,
You think it's the tools holding you back, and what it really is the motivation. Like,
yeah.
I could very easily say I could be a great knife maker if I had a forge. No, I couldn't because I hate blacksmithing. It's like it's funny how it always comes back to that, but that really is the same situation. It's like, no, I probably couldn't, even if I had, a really expensive forge and a power hammer and all that, and I probably still wouldn't really enjoy it. Like, it's just not a thing that appeals to me.
I disagree with you on that aspect of it though. Like there are certain tools that it's not enjoyable to use the crap tool.
True.
It's much more enjoyable to use a nice tool. Like this is one of the reasons I bought the CNC I bought is
Mhm.
because it's super rigid and it's super accurate and it's easy to set up.
Mhm.
So it's a good machine. It's more expensive for sure. However, there's no screwing around.
Right.
I'm not going to mess up a cut because my timing belt skipped a step or some
Mhm.
crap like that. So with blacksmithing, the sucky part of blacksmithing is swinging the bloody hammer.
That's
Like
true.
it would be more fun to have a power hammer.
Alright, fair enough. Fair
I
enough.
mean, you might still not enjoy it, but I bet
Right.
you'll enjoy it more.
That's a good point. And actually, I think, getting back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, I think it's about the good tools are more about creating efficiency than they are about enabling you to do something, because you could do everything theoretically with hand tools. Everything you can do with everything, every function in every shop can be done with a hand tool, and you don't need power to do anything you do. Now, when you start adding tools, power tools, you start creating efficiencies. When you start adding really good tools, well, now you're really adding really big efficiencies. You can buy one of the best examples, I think, is the small Harbor Freight bandsaw. Is literally one of the worst bandsaws on the planet. Everyone that buys the damn thing tells you it's terrible. Everyone. I have a small Rikon bandsaw, and it is absolutely spot on. It is as close to an appliance as I have in my shop. I know every time I turn that thing on, it's just going to cut every single time. No matter when the last time I used it was, I know that I flip that paddle switch, that thing comes on, it spins up, the blade is true, it's going to cut straight. As long as I'm straight, blade is straight. And that makes me more efficient. I'm very efficient in my shop now, very much more efficient. And I think more so than skills that I've picked up over the years, I feel like I've picked up efficiencies. I've gotten faster at doing things. Maybe the work improves because the work just improves. Like that's just experience improves your work. But I think the bigger improvement has been how quickly I can do something at a higher level than I was doing it slower before. And I don't know, sometimes that's what I get the most proud about in the shop is like, oh, I can whack this out in a day or two, where this used to be a 2-week project. So,
Well, that's actually one of the other motivations behind doing the hand tool joinery thing that I've been trying to do is there's lots of times where setting up a machine to make a straight cut is super simple. But when it comes to joinery specifically, if you're making one of something, it's almost always faster to just bust out a handsaw and rip it out.
mhm,
And so that's going to the sculptural thing. You know, my dream. I don't know. Have you ever seen Nick Padula on YouTube at
mm-mm,
all?
mm-mm,
He makes some phenomenal sculptural furniture. He's amazing. But the in my mind, if I want to incorporate a compound angle into something,
mhm,
it'll be just so much faster to take my saw and go cut to that line
right.
versus okay, now I've got to get 15 and a half degrees here and a 9.5 degree lift here,
Yeah,
and then I have to sacrifice the right goat and do a little dance and run it through the table saw before I,
that's exactly
you know.
what it is. It's exactly what it is. It's funny. Oh wow, yeah, sacrificing the right goat. That's usually where I screw up. I get the wrong goat every freaking time. I can't get the
Then
right
the
goat.
SPCA's after you, and it's just another headache.
Oh,
It's real.
who needs that crap, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that that's really interesting, and I've learned. I was very much in the mindset of, especially with juice grooves. Juice grooves have been my nemesis forever, and I finally figured out how to do them on the CNC, and I was like, oh, good, I've enabled the ability to do juice grooves. Truth of the matter was that setting up the CNC to do a juice groove on one cutting board was such a pain and took so much time. Now, was I able to do it? Yes. Was it fast once I set it up? Yes. Was it brain free? Yes. But you know what else is brain free? I set up the jig, I clamp everything down, I put the spacers in so that I know that because I cut specific spacers now because I learned after I used the jig the first time, I'm like, nope, that's not going to work. So I made a set of spacers to space the jig and the board so that the juice groove is always the same distance from the edge. And I had something to lift it up so that the base of my router doesn't get caught in the groove on the side. All this stuff that I set up. Now cutting a juice groove takes 5 minutes. Like I needed a good jig and some experience using it to figure out where I could make little improvements that would make it work better for me. Now it's like I would never do a juice groove on the CNC. What am I, stupid? Like you'd have to be an idiot to go through that setup. And granted, it took me buying a $160 jig, but that $160 jig for making juice grooves has saved me hours in the shop. Plus, my customers are happier with the boards because I'm not just giving them flat boards anymore. They're getting juice grooves. Because I always used to say, I don't do juice grooves. Sorry. You can get a flat board. You can get anything you want as long as it's flat. So,
You can have anything you want as long as I tell you what you want.
exactly. Anything you want. It's like Henry Ford. Anything, any color you want as long as it's black. So, we should let's kick over and do things of the week. So you briefly mentioned your thing of the week, and I was trying to find him. Not gonna lie, I was trying to find him on YouTube while we were talking, so I had his page up, but I couldn't find him. So you said his name is Jonas Olson.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think it's Jonas Olson Woodcraft, I think.
okay. Oh yeah,
Um,
okay. I was spelling it wrong. Yep, that's it. Oh wow, holy crap,
yeah,
that's
he
cool.
just released a video a couple days ago of like an otter, called it an otter shaman summoning a wave. Looks really cool.
Wow. Okay. This is a whole other level of stuff. Whoa. And everything. See, I love when people can take a hard substance. Like polymer clay, it's relatively easy to achieve this, but with wood and even and different metals, to get that organic look out of a hard substance. Like people look at the masterworks of the Italian geniuses, and they look at the marble sculptures and they're like, that's incredibly detailed. I'm like, that's not even the cool part. Like they're wearing a robe, like, and the robe is flowing like a robe would, and that's carved out of marble. Like that's the achievement. But
Well, it's the same as art, like I took an art class with my wife. Again, that's what we do for
I
date
love that
nights.
you guys do this stuff, by the way. I'm so jealous of this. This is something I have to integrate into the repertoire, is doing cool stuff like this. I like it.
Well, yeah, it's nice to be able to do it. But anyway, we
Mhm,
took this art class, and I came away with not so much. What impresses me about painting now is
mhm,
not the painting itself; it's the color. Like
mhm.
it's the blending of the color is
Yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah.
It's like because you start with a palette of like 6 colors, and you can do anything. Like
Mhm.
that's the mind blowing part for me. Is like, yeah, it's not the picture, it's not the sculpture, it's the holy crap, the little technical details that
Yeah.
make the image.
I feel like being a maker almost makes you more appreciative of that kind of stuff because you notice those little details more. You're looking like I was looking I was at West Elm. I was at West Elm and I'm looking at a piece of art on the wall and I'm like, "Oh, that looks really cool." Like I'm looking at it, I'm like, "That's really cool." Then I looked real close. I'm like, "Oh, that's just a CNC piece of artwork." And my ex goes, "How can you tell?" I was like, "There's where the bit nicked it." And you could see where the end mill like plunged into the wood a little too far and they didn't fix it before they hung it on the wall. And she's like, who notices that stuff? I said, people that have used the CNC will look at that and their eye will go right to it like a laser beam. But yeah, you do develop a lot of appreciation for those little minor details because that's the stuff that, hate to say it, but going back to flaws, right? That's the stuff that we pick on our own stuff for. So we're definitely going to see it in other people's stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
But this is good. This is cool stuff. So it's Jonas Olsen, JONASOLSEN Woodcraft on YouTube. This is I'm subscribing now. I love when people bring a YouTube channel to the show because I have found so many amazing YouTube channels through the people that have been on the show. This is definitely one of them. Holy crap. Definitely go check this guy's stuff out. My thing of the week is slightly self-serving, and I don't care. I'm allowed to do that because I'm the host. Um, I mentioned earlier that my girlfriend Kathy has a Wednesday night call-in internet radio show. Well, when you get into this community with them, they ask the people who connect to the community in various ways to do what they call a power hour. So I had the opportunity, and this is something I've always wanted to do. So it was really cool to get to do it. I had the opportunity to do a 1 hour set for their radio station. Now, as we're recording this, it is March 10th. It will air at nomoregamesradio.com. It will air at 2 p.m. Eastern, I believe, on March 18th. And if you follow my Instagram, I'll have it on there. But my power hour will debut. My first experience at spinning records, so to speak, will air next Saturday. And I am very, very excited about this. It was so much fun to do. I got to be a DJ for once instead of a show host. It was so much fun.
So here's my question for you then.
Yeah.
If you were to pick one song
Hmm.
that this is the song that you have to listen to for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh wow. Oh wow. If I could only listen to one song for the rest of my life, I'm gonna tell. I think it would be "November Rain" from Guns N' Roses, and the reason is there's so many different styles brought together in that one song that it's like, at least you wouldn't get bored of the type of song it is. Like, if you get bored with metal, there's piano. It's a ballad. There's some hardcore metal in there. There's some incredible piano playing in there. There's a little bit of everything going on in there. There's some screamy bits, there's some soft bits, and it's what is it? I mean, I think the album cut of that song is like 11 minutes long. Like it's completely ludicrous how long that song actually is. I would say that one only because it would be at least if I'm tired of this part, I could play this part on loop over and over again and at least get something different out of it. Oh man. I actually did the power hour I did it was all pop punk because I feel like pop punk is a genre that doesn't get the respect it deserves. So stuff like Blink 182 and State Champs and We the Kings. We the Kings is actually my favorite band at the moment. So it's been my favorite band for the last couple of years. But, all these bands that everyone kind of a lot of it I'll readily admit that it was a lot of stuff that is forgettable, but was really popular for a little while. But it was really fun to do, and I had a good time doing it. So go check them out. They do a good job. And I mean, I know I'm partial to Kathy and what she does. She goes by DJ Smiles on the station. I've promoted them on my Instagram, and I didn't tell everybody why I was promoting it, but I guess I just gave it away now. Um, but yeah,
Just shameless plugs, those. Geez.
I know. Well, hey,
Almost
listen,
like you made a show for something so you can promote something that you enjoy. Geez.
I know, what a jerk. Who does that? Oh, right, everybody. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Look at me. Look at me.
it's a lot of fun though when you see people. I always say this, I've said it on this show a lot, like, even when I'm not passionate about the same thing, when I see somebody that's really passionate about what they're really into, that alone, even if I don't wanna get passionate about your thing, it makes me wanna be more passionate about my thing. Like, it's like I love watching someone who's really into what they do. Like, I don't know, it motivates me in a weird way that seeing, like, somebody who's at the same level or, even somebody who's better but isn't passionate about it, it's not the same thing, you know?
100%. I agree.
Um, you know what I am passionate about, though? Most of all?
Your
I
patrons.
Damn right, Andrew. You clearly listen to this show. Those people that pay for this wonderful self-serving plug fest that I do every week are Matthew Serio from Artigiano Serio, Big Al Schultz of New York Woodworks, Tori Decker of Tori Did It, Ed Swanson of Ed's Clocks and More, Jake Drews of Make with Jake, Megan Chris from Onyx Designs Woodwork, Christian Neary of Warren Works, who did an absolute I have to stop for a second. He did an absolutely ridiculous desk on his YouTube channel today. It is an absolute masterpiece what he put together for his local community center. If you haven't followed Christian yet after he was on this show, God, come on, guys, go follow him. Warren Works, WarrenWorks.com, and take a look at the desk he made. It is ridiculous. It's an achievement. It's not even my thing of the week, and I can't stop thinking about it. Anyway, to continue, Jeff Stein, aka A Weird Guy, Kim and Garrett from Kim and Garrett Make It, Rory Langefeld of RLO Woodworks and DIY, Robert J. Keller, Rebecca Cole from Beck C Designs, Brian Arsenault, the Seven Hills Maker, Lars Coleman of Colorado Multicraft, Dave Bauer of Dave Bauer Art, Nick Birchtold of Birchtold Design Build, Jeremy Speece, Mike from Pixels to Prototypes, Donald LeBlanc of Fun with Woodworking, Grant Alexander from the Clamp Podcast, Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs, and Billy Polton of Polton Projects. Thank you so much to everyone that supports this show financially. I tremendously appreciate it, especially at this point in my life when I need it the most. I can depend on you all being there, and it means the world to me. If you can't support the show financially, a review helps, sharing the show helps. Anything you can do to get the word out about the show does help because then I can get quality guests like my good buddy Andrew here, who has been an absolute blast chatting with. Even though it took 4 tries to get it going, we finally got one that worked.
Hopefully, it was worth actually listening to, and you'll get lots of lots more Patreon support because big ticket guests like me and Jimmy Duresta.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, you guys don't come free. I mean, if I got to pay bribes, I need a bank account to do it from. I can't pay bribes with a mothy wallet.
Exactly.
But
Yeah, checks in the mail, right?
awesome. Yeah, it's absolutely in the mail, just like all the checks to all the bills. They're all in the mail. They've been in the mail for a couple of years now, and I don't know when they're going to get there. Um, for those of us that would like to follow you online and see what you're up to, where can people find you online? And of course, don't worry, everybody. You don't have to crash your car trying to write them all down. I will have the links in the show notes as usual. But where can people find you online, Andrew?
Just at Hatchmadeit everywhere.
Perfect. On brand, no deviation, easy to find. Smart. Good branding.
That was honestly half the thought is like I just want to just have the same name everywhere.
Perfect.
But
Now there's actually sites you can actually think about what you want to do, plug it in, and then they run it through every social media site and tell you where it's available, which is kind of crazy that people are thinking about it that much right now. Back when I was a kid, we used to just take whatever name was available, and we ended up with numbers at the end of ours. But
yeah,
so
exactly.
such is life. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and thank you so much for giving me so much of your time on a Friday night. Like, I really, really appreciate that. Um,
That's
and
all right. My wife was watching a movie with the kids, so
perfect. Was it a good movie or? Yeah,
I think it was Beverly Hillbillies actually.
probably better off doing the show.
That was my thought.
Exactly. But thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back again next week. I've already lined up the guests, so there won't be an open call for guests next week. We've already figured out who next week's guest is going to be, but maybe I'll put out another open call because I got to tell you, I enjoy doing this show, but I've enjoyed doing it so much more with just who's going to be on the show. I don't know. We'll find out 3 days before we record. It makes it interesting. And I hope you find it interesting enough to come back next week. Till then, have a great week, everybody.